Hi everyone! Since it's taken me a while to post a reaction to Severance Season 2 Episode 4, Woes Hollow, I decided to make this video about how Severance explores how we are all damned to a lonely existence under corporate capitalism. Yes, I used the damned C word, but it will be relevant. You'll see. I emotionally really resonated with this episode, which I think factored into why I was so reluctant to watch the episode again for review. I realized that I was more interested in the themes of loneliness and its effect manifested in this episode. While there are important plot points to explore in episode 4, I think other YouTubers probably do a better job of pointing out those Easter eggs. Today I will talk about Woes Hollow as an exploration into loneliness and the punishments doled out to people desiring to live their truth and free others. According to the Macrodata Refiner's orientation booklet provided in the Lexington letter, woe is meant to elicit feelings of melancholy or despair. Throughout the Woes Hollow episode, we see how Lumen manifests melancholy and despair through the story of Dieter Egan, and how the MDR team members, particularly Irving, experience despair. Ultimately, despair is a twin of loneliness. The episode Woes Hollow opens with Innie Irving unwittingly waking up on a frozen lake, dressed in black fur. The frame zooms out to show the scope of Irving to the lake, and then zooms out further to show Irving's location in context with the surrounding forest. He screams to an echoing emptiness. He is an isolated entity. While Mark eventually answers, Irving is still stuck with the burden of having to travel to the cliff by himself. It is a grueling and solitary effort until he bumps into Helly. But he can already tell something is off with her. Why wasn't she where he started? Why did she seem so nonchalant about the circumstances? Despite the Great Resignation, which really popped off during the COVID 2020 to 2022, a Pew Research found that many workers cited satisfaction with relationship to coworkers as a key factor for satisfaction at work. If most people had a choice, they would not work, but most of us need to work for survival. Our coworkers remind us of our collective condition and can make or break our sanity in the workplace. Irving's acute recognition that Helly is quote-unquote off is indicative of Irving's need for that genuine connection at work to sustain himself in an environment he finds inherently deceptive and duplicitous. Helly, the person who was the catalyst for Irving's disillusionment with Lumen, not being who she says she is a deep betrayal that can only be rectified through extreme action. Helena misunderstands her Innie, because she believes that her Innie's lack of outie memories makes her dumber and susceptible to beguiling. But the reality is that Innies are extremely emotionally intelligent because they are not burdened with the memories that make us jaded and unable to see each other. This is why Helena gives Irving the snow seal. She thinks it can prove that she has the childlike instincts, but she gives the seal in a perfunctory manner as opposed to a sincere desire to connect. Helena's attempts again to channel Helly are by laughing at Dieter Egan's story. By laughing at the Dieter Egan story makes it seem as though she's connecting with her fellow Innies, but she forgets to tie her disbelief in the story to comments about the plight and abuse of Innies, which is what Helly would have done. Helena instinctually does not believe in the rights of Innies, so despite the fact that she wants to hang out with them and have sex with them, she does not believe in the right of Innies, or else she would have awakened Helly R by now. Her jokes lead to the destruction of marshmallows, which is important to the Innies since it's the only treat available to them. And I've always said this when it comes to how adults treat children and their toys and their food. I think a lot of parents and adults laugh when children kind of go berserk over the abomination of toys and food. But when you think about a child, that's the only currency that they see. And as adults, we understand, bro, get your money up, right? Get your money up. Who cares about like a chip, or who cares about your toy? But the reality is that for them, that's the equivalent of adult money. When you take away their food or you make it seem like this bargaining chip, for them, you're kind of taking away the only thing that has value to them in their life. Her jokes lead to anyway, Helena for being an outie and higher on the socioeconomic status than basically probably anyone in existence, has no issues with accessing marshmallows on the outside. She completely misunderstands the motivations of the innies, and this serves as another tip to Irving about her fraud. And this kind of ties to the holographic iterations of the innies, because they sit in this deep, uncanny valley of realism. I think the holographic entities represent our digital selves, which in the modern era is a necessary extension of our true selves. Our digital existence is intended to stave off our loneliness, but in fact it can further isolate us. The innies are creeped out by the holographic iterations because it forces them to see a lifeless version of themselves, which is also how many people see the work versions of themselves. A work version that is subdued, obedient, and minimizes all elements of personal expressions. Irving running away and being forced to sleep outside further gives context to this truth sinking in a lonely experience. None of his friends try to find him, and the authority figures, Mr. Milchek and the underage Miss Huang, also do not search for him. His dreams, which serve as a connection between his inner and outer self, allows him to deduce that Helly's outie is an Egan. In Irving's dream, he is in a burned forest where looming cubicles have been recreated. Woe, as represented by the small bride, is his office mate, and flying insects flock around his monitor. The rot of corporate America. The woe that follows us as we do our day-to-day tasks. In this next section, I will explore how the MDR team members experience loneliness and its impacts on the actions that they take in this episode. So, Mark's loneliness, and here I have a picture of Gemma / Miss Casey, but it'll make sense soon. Mark's loneliness is the reason why he cannot see Helena's ruse. He has the most access to evidence of her fraud, but his desire to engage in a romantic relationship overrides his ability to determine who he's actually interacting with. His outie is a depressed widow unable to integrate with quote-unquote normal society. The yearning to experience love again moves beyond the bounds of Severance procedure, especially since he is now integrated. He's essentially emotionally lobotomized and cannot determine that Helena is actually playing Helly. We don't know much about Outie Irving, but we do know he lives alone in an apartment complex with his dog Radar. Loneliness is not just a factor in Irving's life, though, and as we can see, it's also a factor in Mark's and Helena's life. So, while Dylan is married and has kids, it's obvious his relationship with his wife is strained, and that it would be inappropriate for his children to fulfill his need for companionship. And unfortunately, we do see parents do this all the time, where they have their children play friend or mommy and daddy. And this is why people kind of weirdly always say to people, as you know, a 30-year-old woman myself, people will say to you like, well, you're going to be lonely when you're an adult. And it seems like such a cruel task to give a baby, a child, to be your companion in life when they're trying to create their own. I don't think that's fair, and unfortunately a lot of people do have that perspective, particularly for women, but to an extent men as well, that your children are supposed to be your lifelong companions. Woe's depiction as a small wife is representative of how marriage does not give us reprise from the feelings of melancholy that emerge from life. Despite this, any Dylan, only knowing idealized versions of marriage, seeks connections with his outie's wife to feel meaning. And this kind of comes to Helena, who I hate. I think she's a certified weirdo. Anyway, and then you see how Helena deals with loneliness. She descends into perversity to assuage her loneliness. Many believe that she paraded as an innie to work on behalf of Lumen. However, I believe Helena is on an independent mission to experience camaraderie she is unable to experience in her real life. One can easily imagine the social isolation of probably being the richest and most powerful person in the room, even as children, and knowing that every action made will reflect on her family's business. However, we know that her father verbally abuses her for any perceived transgression. Despite likely wanting a reprise from her upbringing, she brings her attachment to power and influence to her interactions with the innie, and that's most kind of expressed in that scene where she brings a seal to Irving And Irving insists on knowing more about what she saw when she was with her outie self. And the reality is that she was upset at that moment that she couldn't do what she does on the outside, which is look at somebody and they look at her and they see Helena Egan. They see an Egan. They see the most powerful person in the room, probably in the world, and they know that she has the ability to ruin their life, and they acquiesce. And she cannot do that to Irving because Irving does not know exactly who she is, and even if he did, he really seems to not give a F. She no longer engages with Irving because she recognizes she cannot wield her most powerful weapon, which is her power and influence. But to put more bluntly about what I hate about Helena, Helena is a sex pest. Yeah, I said it. She's a sex pest. I heard that in the UK, you say that's like one of the worst things you could just say to somebody, and it's not used as frequently here in the USA. Anyway, Helena has limitless resources. She could probably satiate her sexual desires in a number of ways, including attempting to have a relationship with Audi Mark. Instead, she pretends to be a different version of herself in order to have sex with someone under false pretenses. Again, the dynamic is that the innies are childlike versions of themselves. So her 30-year-old self is engaging with sex with someone who has the mental age of 2. The fact that this appears to be her only option for sexual connection speaks to the depravity of her life. She lives to serve Lumen, and no matter the extent of her sacrifices, she's still subject to the abuse of her father's and general corporate needs. Helena claims she doesn't like who she is on the outside and that she's ashamed, but she cannot change the fact that she's an outie and that she has significant power to change the reality not only for herself, but for all innies and people impacted by the actions of Lumen. Arguably, she is a prisoner based off her upbringing and likely indoctrination, but it still doesn't make any sense that her knee-jerk reaction to all of this deprivation and being subservient to her father is to have sex with Mark. Like, how is that a part of the situation? Loser. And this is also a part of me thinks when she's in that tent with Mark and she says, I'm ashamed of who I am on the outside. I think she was literally reacting to what she just did. Like, that's crazy. That's a wild situation. And, you know, this story can never come out to anybody because it would literally ruin her. And I'm sure a lot of people would be like, yeah, put her in jail. I would be one of those people, by the way. In the end, Irving is no longer willing to play nice. He directly confronts Helena about her cruelty and takes an action that ensures the return of Helly. He threatens to drown Helena, which is similar to the action Helly takes to get Helena to listen to her. So as we saw all throughout season 1 of Severance, Helly was like, I will kill both of us if you continue to keep me here. The waterboarding works, and Helena finally reveals her deception by telling Mr. Milchick, God damn it, Seth, do it. We know from Dylan's visit to the family visitation center that the innies are not allowed to know the first name of their superiors. And now the entire team knows Mr. Milchick's first name. And I suspect these next couple of episodes are just going to see Mr. Milchick struggle to keep control of the innies. And that's going to really look poorly on him when he's connecting with the board and what have you. Ultimately, Helly is returned, but as a result of Irving's action, Innie Irving is effectively killed off. Life and corporations punish people for seeking the truth, and this unfortunately means that any successful efforts can lead to both unemployment and your life being changed. Milchick's final speech about Innie Irving being eliminated from Earth is reflective of how unemployed individuals are dehumanized for their condition. Irving is no longer employed and therefore no longer exists. And I think that's also an interesting part of the metaphor of Severance. It's this idea as well that if you leave the business, if you leave the company, you die. And some businesses, unfortunately not in America is known for a lot of job hopping. But in some businesses in America, and you can imagine especially 20, 30 years ago, if you left a business and it didn't seem like you had an immediate job prospect, people you became a persona non grata. You don't become a real person. Unemployment is kind of one of the most shameful things to happen to anybody. And so it's kind of an interesting dynamic when you think about how Lumen, when they quote unquote fire somebody, they sever and kill their innies. And that's dramatic action kind of reflects on what unemployment does to people. So let's get into some questions and theories. So in this episode, we explored woe, but if you look at the Macrodata Refiners booklet, you see that woe, frolic, dread, and malice are put in an order, and I think that we're going to go into that order. So I think frolic is going to be next, which is going to be great because we need some joy, gaiety, and ecstasy. And we know that Helly or Helena Egan's like bodyguard has frolic on his thumb tattooed on his arm, so I wonder if we're going to get more about him. It's going to be really interesting to see dread and then malice. And then when you think about these four tempers, this is something I just thought looking at it. Like, three of these are really horrible emotional states. They kind of overlap, right? Like melancholy and despair, and then fear, anxiety, or apprehension. They kind of are one and the same. And then malice, like, if this is the four things that are supposed to define humanity, we're all kind of effed. We're all, nothing's gonna work for us. So my next question was a deep one. How does Mark's integration work? I was pretty confused because in season 1, we see PD. He seems to be able to contain memories of his innie and outie self simultaneously. But in this episode, Mark appears to only be able to, he's able to do what Severance does, which is completely compartmentalize his outing memories, except for the one time Miss Casey Gemma's face is overimposed on Helena's face. I hope they clear up what is happening with Mark's reintegration because I was just a bit confused. But I'm also open to this idea that they just wanted to make an artistic episode, so they didn't think too deep about how that plays in with Mark's integration. But still, it was kind of confusing for me. Because, right, let's imagine he does have Mark's Audie's memories. If I'm Mark Audie, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I do remember signing a release form to have them do something, although I do get the sense that they're not actually, like, in a forest. It might be some virtual reality stuff happening, but I would be confused about the circumstances. And then I'd be confused, why am I having sex with my Okay, anyway, pointing out that if the innies were in fact in the forest, which I'm suspecting they're not, this would be the first time that they experience sleep. So that'd be really cool and fun. As I mentioned, I do think that they're in some virtual reality type situation, but we'll have to wait and see. Yeah, I'm excited to see the other four tempers. Any Irv dying is really exciting to me because I suspect that means we're going to see a lot more of Audie Irving, which is going to be really exciting. He seems like a fascinating character. And that's going to be really exciting. So that's all I have for you guys today. I've been a little tired. I think this episode really depressed me. I don't know why. It was a phenomenal episode, as everyone noted, but it just depressed me for the reasons I kind of talked about in this episode. But thank you for watching. Until next time, this was Strategic Delusion.